So I'm joined today by Effie Mansdorf from Adaptive Shield. She runs their customer success program. She has a very strong history in customer success. I believe over 20 years before CS is what CS is today. She was already a part of it and leading the charge. So maybe take a moment here, Effie, share your background a little bit about where you worked previously, what your career journey has been like that brought you to Adaptive Shield.
Okay, great. So I've been in the tech space probably about 20 years now. That's a dinosaur in that term. And of course, I've always been in customer facing roles. I started my career really in the project management side, and that was really what, we were calling, customer success in one way or the other. It was either account management, project management. Then in the past decade or so, a little over a decade, I moved from the East Coast to Israel now and sort of transitioned or moved the focus on what is now customer success. And I've been in various leadership roles where the past few roles that I've had have been focused in the cybersecurity industry and specifically starting customer success teams from scratch. Really my forte are startups where we're just building processes, and being in the cybersecurity space at my current company and at my previous company raises really individual challenges for that space as well. So it's been really, really exciting career, and looking forward to my next chapter, whatever it will be.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about Adaptive Shield. I know you are in the security space. I know you guys did a fantastic Series A back in late 2021, and the company's been on a pretty significant growth trajectory. But tell us a little bit more about what does the company do? What does the product do? What's kind of the origin story? How did it come about?
It's a great question. So first of all, Adaptive Shield is an absolutely fantastic company, not only to work for, but also in terms of the services we give and the product that we offer. So Adaptive Shield has been co-founded a few years ago by two individuals who are now the CEO, who is Maor, and Johnny, who's the CTO. And they came out of the cybersecurity intelligence units within the IDF, the Israeli military, which is pretty typical for a lot of the cybersecurity companies here. That's really where the career started. And they saw really that there's a gap in many of the cybersecurity tools that are out there. And that's really how Adaptive Shield was born. And even if you're not in the cybersecurity space, it's really easy to understand, because really what Adaptive Shield does is solve the challenge of organizations now having, dozens and dozens, and some of them even hundreds of SaaS tools within different tech stacks. Marketing have theirs, sales have another, IT, HR, and the list goes on and on. So you can imagine how even in larger enterprise companies, or even smaller companies, each SaaS tool comes with security checks, and those are most often overlooked. Or even if they aren't overlooked, no one really knows how to use them or how to configure them properly, because the owners are not security people. Yeah. And even if they are, they don't, no one could really manage all of these large quantities of SaaS applications. So that's where Adaptive Shield comes in, because the problem with not configuring it properly is that it leads to attacks. It leads to hackers. If you're just not configuring one little thing that you think is benign or not really important, that could lead to attacks. So that's really what Adaptive Shield does. So we have the excellent opportunity of not only working with security folks, but we also work a lot with the business owners and the business applications, because they're the ones who could really understand each configuration and really own configuring it properly through our tool.
Got it. So I think there's obviously different aspects to security, but this idea that there's multiple products within startups, and in fact, one of the things that we've noticed over the last 10 to 12 years is just the amount of fragmentation that has occurred with SaaS applications, where there are point solutions for literally every function, and often more than one point solution for every business function in the company. And one of the statistics, Effie, that I read recently is that a startup within its first 2 years is up to 35 different SaaS applications to run its business. I can tell you, we're 2 years old as a company. We're definitely more than 35 right now, the different SaaS apps that we use. And then as they scale and as they grow, all the way up to the enterprise level, you get up to 280 different SaaS applications distributed across the organization. A lot of it has to do with people making these purchase decisions bottoms up in an organization as opposed to somewhat more tops down historically. Is that a favorable trend, I guess, from an Adaptive Shield standpoint? Is that something that helps you guys grow your business?
Absolutely. And even beyond the ones that are purchased, there's so many freeware and free trials that you could have with different SaaS applications. And, if you just use one certain aspect or have below a certain license count, any organization can use it. And that usually doesn't go through procurement, and it doesn't usually go through any of the due diligence of those organizations to make sure that this is something that we really want. Accessing other data within our company. So those things that, those insights also are very important. And those are things that our tool also can surface, what other SaaS applications are floating around, maybe some that even you had POC and you forgot, but are still connected to different other applications through APIs. I think especially now, even those traditional on-premise applications that, that we've seen in the banking industry, in the fintech industry, and all of these sort of like old school industries are slowly but surely moving to the cloud, because that's the future. No one's really doing on-prem anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had a couple new people join us since we started the conversation. If you're joining us now, feel free to ask questions as we go through this. Let us know where you're joining in from or what role do you play in your organization. That always helps for us to tailor the conversation as we go through this. Okay, so Effie, let's talk customer success, right? So you were one of the early people at this company. You essentially helped pull the CS organization together. Tell us a little bit about what that journey looks like. Where are you, where did you start? Where are you now?
So one of the reasons, it's every CS leader's dream is to start sort of molding a company, molding a team the way that you see fit. But with that comes the challenges. So basically I was hire number one in this customer success team with no previous data, no previous, best practices. I didn't know what works well, what doesn't work well, what does success look like for our customers. So my first basically objective was to go back to the basics and be a CSM myself and really understand our customers. So as I'm building up a process, I'm building it based on sort of facts that I see that are relevant to our customer base and our solution, as well as some of my past experience. So having that was an amazing challenge, and I loved it. And then obviously after some time, I slowly built the team up. And under my team is built from technical support, which is also under success, and the CSMs. And now we're global with a team in the US and the team that takes care of our EMEA-based customers as well.
Got it. Very cool. So, I think one of the questions I'm curious about is like when you first started with Adaptive Shield and you're the first person in the CS org, and then of course, as you built the team around yourself and the company, your role has changed and evolved. What is it like? How do you, what are some of the choices you have to make when you're stepping into a role like this on day one? And then as the company evolves, you're making some decisions about processes, people, data, et cetera. What are some of the important decisions that you have to make along the way?
Right. So basically, if anyone's ever worked in a startup, that one of the great things about it is that it's everyone wears multiple hats. There aren't a lot of processes, but in a good way, because that allows startups to be very innovative, very fast, and to move things along without the bureaucratic roadblocks that maybe for more established companies have. But with that, we also see that you really can't establish a process when everybody's involved and there is no process at all. So one of the first things that I've had, not only understanding what my customers want and what success looks like for them, is also understanding internally, how can I build this successfully and collaborate with all the other teams without sort of, taking some things off their plate that they, this is a CS thing now. You may not have, you may have done it in the past, 6 months, but let's do it the right way. And let's focus on what we need to. So one of the good things about that, again, coming in from nothing, is the ability to also mold the collaboration and do it right between a lot of the other departments that CS typically interacts with, which be it sales, marketing, or product. One of the challenges that a lot of CS teams have is, for example, the communication with product, how to close the loop on the voice of the customer, all the data that's coming in. Product may see data, we see data, that's what drives a lot of the product making decisions or the roadmap, but how to communicate that effectively. And I've done that in other companies as well, not just this one. And that's really one of the things that that I've been focusing on and continue to focus on as we grow.
So let's take each of those and peel it apart a bit, because product, marketing, sales, very different functions, very different needs, and CS is typically the organization in the middle of it all, trying to coordinate across different functions. On the one hand, making sure that the customers are being successful. On the other hand, making sure that each one of those teams feels a reason or has a reason to engage with the CS team or with the customer directly. So let's start with product. Obviously, the product roadmap, communicating that out to customers, bringing sort of, any feedback or patterns that you see back to the product team. That's kind of what you just called out as a key priority. How do you go about it? Like what, are there certain processes? Are there certain patterns that you look for? Are there certain tools that you use to capture information that you can take back to the product team?
Yeah. So first of all, obviously, so there's two aspects to it. One is data driven and one is more of qualitative driven. So I'll start with the latter. So the first, that part is, I think, pretty easy because we have a very high touch model at Adaptive Shield. So we're able to connect with all of our customers and really understand what their use cases are and start seeing patterns across the board for all of our customers. And I communicate that back to our product team and see, are there trends in the market that we really need to focus on and build our, and enhance our product around that? Are there some sort of common denominator challenges that everyone's having? And beyond that, also understand which of our customers are really big fans of ours. We have huge champions there that are willing to collaborate with us and be the design partners, those beta testers, and so on and so forth. So I work really closely with the product team in order to establish that and to bring forth those customers that we could work with. The second part is the data. Right. It's a black hole. Like what are they using? How often are they logging in? What areas of our solution are they utilizing more or they're utilizing less? Mm-hmm. So this data is really important, and it's something that needs to also be shared with product. Aside from also how are we measuring? Product helps me with that as well. So that data-driven part is also very important.
Got it. Very helpful. And Effie, can you talk a little bit about the tools that you use or your team uses to get an understanding of how the customer's actually using your product? And obviously, like product teams have a bunch of different tools like Pendo and Amplitude and Mixpanel and whatnot that they use to instrument the product. But is the data available to you in a format that's consumable by your team?
Yeah, so in this particular case of Adaptive Shield, we have an in-house tool that we have developed. However, in previous companies, the data has come in different formats, and sometimes the challenge that I've seen, let's say with my previous company, even before that, is which has to do a lot with what we opened up with having so many sources from so many places and not being able to really process it the right way. And if I can't process it the right way, I can't move it on to product. So I think one of the, even though I've had different sort of tools in the past, the challenge is really understanding how to interpret these things and how to really make it consumable, not only to myself, but also to the product team as well.
Got it. And, you have some unique challenges because your company sells software from a security, in the security domain. And so there's only so much data that you can push outside the company to use external tools and so on. But talk to us a little bit about that. Like, how does that influence? Because you worked at a number of companies prior to here where that was not the case. So what changes when you're in the security domain from a data standpoint? What kind of restrictions do you have to work through?
Yeah, it's so much more complex. So in other SaaS companies that I've worked with that were not in the cyber domain, CSMs can essentially log into the environment of our customer and sort of see what they're doing and help them along the way. In the cybersecurity space, that is a complete no-no. We can't access our customer's environment unless we have explicit sort of permission to do so. And in Adaptive Shield, that's not something that we do anyway. So what we're basing it off of is raw data. And also the raw data that we do see can't have something called PII, personal identifiable information. And that's not even specific to the security. There's GDPR in Europe, which also personal information isn't allowed to be accessed. So again, not really specific to the security space, just in general, and security and privacy issues overall that we're seeing now in all these SaaS tools, but even more so for us. So we basically consume raw data, behavior, certain metrics, but sort of not seeing it within the context of our tool does present a challenge. So we really have to understand really what are we measuring with what's available to us, what is worth measuring, and how do we measure the success? How do we measure what adoption looks like without talking to each and every one of our customers and having access to their site and seeing it?
Yeah. Makes sense. And speaking of metrics, what would you say are kind of from a, different CS organizations have different priorities in terms of what metrics they're held accountable to. If you kind of have to rank that 1, 2, and 3, what are the top 3 metrics that you hold yourself and your team accountable to?
Right. So probably the biggest metric, and that's probably the most common one, is the net renewal rate. At the end of the day, is this customer renewing? And are they expanding as well? Are they seeing enough value in the tool and the solution that they bought? Are they willing to also expand into other tools? Are they willing to increase their licenses? Do they see value? That is a very important metric that me and my team, we're all measured against. And then there's other sort of KPIs that are very important. One of them is adoption. How are we measuring adoption and success for our customers? Every individual SaaS tool is different of how they measure adoption, but common ones are the licenses being utilized to its full capacity? Are they using key features? Where the value is for your solution, are they seeing that value, and how are you measuring that value? So those are sort of very important KPIs. And I also have very important KPIs that are with marketing, as our advocacy is very important to us at Adaptive Shield, especially really at any startup. And I think even beyond the startup, we want customers to be advocates. And customers who don't see value, who don't have a good experience, who are unsatisfied, they won't advocate. So I measure the fact that we could get a lot of customer advocates as a direct result of the great work that CSMs do as well.
Got it. Awesome. So very helpful to kind of talk through the priorities and the metrics that kind of map to those priorities, Effie. I think, when you and I last talked, you had mentioned that because your company sells into the security domain, many of your customers are not even comfortable having their logo represented on your website. And so it creates an opportunity and sort of a different dynamic where, every marketing team wants to be able to reference clients. And in your case, the CSMs play an important role in making that happen. So talk to us a little bit about what that process looks like. What's the collaboration between marketing and CS organization around, establishing more credibility and references and so on? Because it's such a unique and different space in that sense.
It is. Logos is probably such a white whale with cyber. Not that it's unattainable. It's just a lot more challenging, because cybersecurity companies and customers tend to not really want to advertise what tool they're using in order to protect themselves. And that's a general rule. There's always exceptions, and there are ways to go around it. But the typical logo video testimonial, while is attainable, is a lot more difficult. So there are other ways in order to do advocacy within cybersecurity teams. And this is also for non-cyber as well. First of all, there's internal advocacy. Like I mentioned before, having customers willing to collaborate, becoming design partners or beta testers, or giving any feedback, that in itself is advocacy, because they're taking time from their schedule and really helping and assisting us in developing a tool. And ultimately, they do get something out of it if a tool is developed, but that's really mostly for us. And that's a really great indicator and great sign that we have a great advocate on our hands, that they're willing to go to that extra mile of working with us. So that's the internal part that a lot of cybersecurity companies, and of course can focus on. The other ones are co-presenting in events. Events tend to be a little bit more closed, they're not very advertised. So a lot of executives would be very happy to co-present the solution in certain events. And that's not public like a website. And that's also something that is very helpful for our customer individuals and those executives, and just also promoting their own brands and, collaborating and presenting something great that they've done. And of course, the typical sales references, which is one-on-one, a lot of customers are willing to do. So that's a great thing. So the way that we work with marketing is really identifying what the need is, identifying what their ideal profile of a customer looks like, and working from there.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, great. And then, you kind of, so we talked about product and how you interact with the product team. We talked about marketing and how you collaborate with the marketing team. There's some pretty unique challenges from a security domain standpoint. Before we go into the sales side of the house, I'm just going to pause for a moment to see because we have a couple of new people join. If you have any questions for Effie, please go ahead and post those in the chat session or raise your hand. We'll open the mic to you. Rashid, thank you for sharing which company you're with. Lumio, leader in zero trust segmentation. Love to hear from the others. Which companies do you work for? What role do you play there? We want this to be an interactive session. We want this to be a conversation that we spur in the industry around important topics from a customer success standpoint. So please do share and let us know where you're joining in from. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Let me just back to you, Effie, for this sort of sales collaboration piece. So you already touched on one of those, which is very important from a sales standpoint, which is having a sales reference available so that if a client is about to make a decision, they need to talk to someone, they can reach out through your CS organization, find that person to talk to who will validate your solution. What are some of the other ways in which you collaborate with the sales team?
So of course, anything that has to do with any sort of commercial interaction with a customer has to go through a salesperson. While, the way that specifically that we're measured at this point, our success is accountable for renewals and upsells and cross sells, but not responsible. That means that we have to bring the customer to the table. We have to ensure that those commercial and the growth in the renewal is happening. However, we don't talk anything commercial. So in this case, while the differences between any sort of new business customer and existing business customer is that the CSM has really been able to build a relationship and see the growth and the value throughout the contract length time, whether it's a year or 2 or 3 or whatever. The CSM is the one who really has most insight. So when it does come to that commercial discussion, they're the ones who could guide the salespeople into how to move forward from a commercial standpoint, whether an opportunity, maybe a customer success qualified lead for another cross-sell of another product, expanding in a region, whatever it may be. The CSM is the one who's going to advise the salesperson on that. And the same with maybe even increasing license costs. Have they seen enough value that justifies that? Or should we just leave it as is because we have some room to grow there? So these are some of the conversations that the CSMs will have with sales and collaborate together.
Got it. Very, very interesting. And so, Effie, as I talk to more and more people in the industry, I see kind of two extremes in the models that are out there between how CS and sales teams collaborate. One is the CS person is purely engaging from a relationship standpoint, trusted advisor to the customer, voice of customer back into the organization, and therefore not engage in any commercial conversation, bring your sales leader or sales counterpart into that conversation. The other is, the sales team's focused on new logos and acquiring new logos, and that is at any startup, that's an important function. But then, the CS team sort of works on avoiding churn and identifying growth opportunities and accounts and closing those in some cases as well, and getting paid on a commission basis for those types of opportunities. And then, there's always different variations of this model with shared comp and comp plans and whatnot. What's the right way to think about it? Like there's no right or wrong answer, for every company has to make their own choice. But from your perspective as a CS leader who's been at a number of different organizations, what are the factors to consider in making that decision?
Right. So obviously there is no one good answer, because this is probably the most debatable topic within this community of
that and account health scores.
how are they, right? How are we going to do, how are we going to comp them, you know, and what's the right model? And I think, you know, the answer is it really depends on the stage of your company. The price point of your product is really important. The renewal model, is it on a monthly? Is it on a yearly? Is it a multi-year? So all of these factors have to be taken in consideration. I will say, as a rule of thumb, the longer the lengthier the sales process is, maybe because you have a very high price point, it's in the half 1-2 million, you know, ARR or whatever it is, and the more lengthy time and complex, that probably is no argument there that commercially should be led by the sales team.
Yeah.
And also it has to do with, you know, what point are you in the company? Are you in the growth stage? Are you in the startup stage? Are you more corporate? Are you established? There's so many factors that tie into it. In general, I'm a big believer of the hunter and farmer split. That any sort of new logo, anything new should come from sales, anything existing should be nurtured and owned by CS. We don't do that at Adaptive Shield at this point in particular, because it just doesn't make sense for where we are at this point in the company. But I do see that perhaps happening in the future.
Got it. Okay. So I think, you know, in terms of sort of this conversation around customer success, collaboration with sales, product, marketing, this has been a fantastic conversation. Any final thoughts as we bring this to a close from your perspective? Anybody who's starting to think about, who's been in your, who's sort of stepping into your shoes from where you were a few years back, starting to set up these processes for Adaptive Shield, what advice would you have for them?
Anyone who's starting out, I would say get into the trenches yourself. That there's no other way, because there's no history, you don't know what's going on, and plan for change. If you're in a startup, that means that everything is very innovative, things are changing very fast, and you'll have to know how to move along with it. And I would probably say the most number one, hire really well and start collaborating with your fellow teammates and other teams really early on, as early as possible, because you're also creating processes together, and do it the right way as much as you can at the beginning.
Great. Awesome. This has been a fantastic session. If anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way to do it is in LinkedIn. I'd be happy to make a connection there.
Great. Thank you for your time today. And thank you everybody who joined in today from as far away as Netherlands. Gary Hoffman, who's been on several of these sessions with us for some time. Thank you for joining us again today. And the recording for this conversation. Thank you, Rashid. Recording will be available, I think, by end of day tomorrow. We will have posted this on our website, and we would have sent out an email to you. So please feel free to share this with your colleagues and others. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on a new session. If you'd like to reach out to me, asim@immersa.co, always happy to talk to anybody about customer success, data-driven processes, and how to leverage product usage data. Thank you for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.